Hey guys, so today is basically a summary of the last week and the content that we created. We're going to talk about the learning curves that the Proteas went through this World Cup campaign. So we're going to try to look at some of the teams and what they did right and what the Proteas can learn from them. So I'm here with Alasdair again with a beautiful black drop normally. I mean, it is quite misty today, so we're a bit worried about that, but I hope you guys still enjoy the content that we're putting out. Alistair, you put out a piece. You mentioned some three topics about Australia and what the Proteas can learn from Australia. I think they're a good team to start with because seeing that they were in the dumps before with the whole Sandpaper Gate and David Warner coming in back into the team and Steve Smith coming back into the team and how that affected their team, it actually didn't. I was quite positive about that and quite impressed about that. Yeah, what did you think about Australia? And what can the Proteas learn from the way Australia prepared for this World Cup?
Well, firstly, thanks, Khalid. Good morning to you. It's a bit chillos,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's good. We're hitting here between like 3 or 4 lines, so maybe it's a bad omen for England winning the World Cup this morning.
Wow.
Personally, I want New Zealand. I think everyone wants New Zealand. I don't want England to win, but they are the best ODI team in the world, so that should end up being like that. But yes, thanks, yeah. So with Australia, let's start with A. So basically, Australia, there's a lot to learn from them. Yes, they had a bad loss in the semi-final. It was a bit of a shocker, but England were all over them. It was the type of Australia performance that England showed that they could do. That's Australia we saw in the 90s and the noughties. So well done on England on that side. But yeah, just beginning off with Australia, one of the first points that I really think that we should have done, or maybe thought about doing, was actually bringing Keshav Maharaj into the ODI team a year ago. We saw with Nathan Lyon playing in the World Cup for Australia just how much um, pressure he could build. So all Aaron Finch had to do if they weren't getting any wickets was throw the ball to Nathan Lyons. He would build test match type of pressure. And then on the other end, you had a Stark who could fire it in, get some reverse swing, and you know, put pressure on the batsman to play shots, and then essentially take away wickets through there. So for there, that like for me, that point would be a big point is to bring in Maharaj. There's no, I mean, there's the myth that like test players can't play white ball stuff is I think it's utter rubbish. We had some really great players in the past, not just South African players, do exceedingly well on the ODI stage, coming from the test arena. So there's that factor. Another part would be with Australia, and this was a masterstroke by Justin Langer, was bringing in Ricky Ponting as an assistant coach. Brilliant, masterstroke. Father figure, role model, so competitive on the field, even off the field. He was competitive. You could feel Ricky Ponting's aura in that team during the World Cup. I mean, a massive turnaround for Australia in the last year since Sandpaper Gate, and it must be kind of a lot to do with what he could do. He was with the players all the time. Pat Cummings actually said he had Davey Warner and Glenn Maxwell on his hip all the time. He took the guys out to play golf, took them out for drinks. Real great team guy, and perhaps the Proteas could have missed a big stroke with that. Is that having maybe a Graham Smith or a Gary Kirsten or Sean Pollock, even a Jonty Rhodes, someone who's a role model to the guys when they were young little kids, someone that they could learn from and just keep the energy flowing. I mean, you had the whole AB debacle happening, and it was like, would that have happened under the watch? And what effect would it have had if there had been a guy like Ricky Ponting in the team? Yeah.
So there's also a column from Muhammad Ali that's on our website as well. We talks about maybe Ponting taking over the Proteas job. That's his fantasy signing basically for the Proteas, if you could say. So that brings up all your points that you just spoke about. Then Ponting's fighting spirit, and that same fighting spirit always makes Australia a team that is going to compete in any World Cup in every year. I mean, some people said they didn't stand a chance this year. They looked a bit weak. I was one of those people. But they always pull it through somehow. You mentioned the test bowling and Keshav Maharaj holding up an end. I mean, he also can bat a little bit. That's also quite awesome. But I want to talk about the bowling again because if you look at some of the other teams, especially New Zealand and England, the way they went about their game plans for bowling. I mean, there's as I particularly use New Zealand because New Zealand has had their bowling plans spot on with regards to all of their bowlers that bowled similar lines and lengths, a similar game plan that they obviously premeditated to be able to restrict the opposition batsmen. You saw that's particularly against India, the way they restricted the top three. And then what happens is it bowls pressure, like you say, and then it allows your strike bowlers, like for example, they had Trent Boult, and for example, us, Lungingidi and Kagiso Rabada, if they can produce the same type of pressure on the opposition bowlers, then our strike bowlers can do something different to try to get a wicket. So maybe down the line, that's how they need to look at, and maybe look at some of the future bowlers that can do those type of roles. Lutus Pamla is a youngster that can do that. I mean, we already have Andile Peklikwai that kind of does that in the middle overs. So bringing in a bowler that can actually help with the line and length and keep consistency and to pile the pressure on the opposition, and then obviously our strike bowlers can attack better. I think that's maybe a lesson that we can learn from both England with the way Wokes and obviously Archer, the way they bowl up front. Obviously, Lungi and Kagiso should be able to pull the same type of tricks. I mean, they're world class bowlers. There's no doubt about that.
One player that stood out for me, Lockie Ferguson, fantastic bowler, fantastic. And here's the funny thing, is that we actually had a very, like the same type of bowler as him quite a few years back in Rusty Tehran.
Minus the moustache.
Minus the moustache. But you see, the thing is that we've actually got some of these type of bowlers in our domestic scene. And the beautiful thing about New Zealand is that they actually, they play above what we would expect where they're at. So, I mean, they've done exceedingly well to get to this World Cup final for the second World Cup in a row. They play out of their skins in the World Cup. We have abundance of great players, but often they don't raise their game 20% more than actually what they're worth. Whereas New Zealand, they just find that extra 20%. Ferguson was amazing against India. He was amazing against probably 80% of the teams in this World Cup. But that's the type of aspect that that ingredient that we didn't have. And we often have it in the bilateral series, but the bilateral series are always at home or away, but you don't see a combination of other teams playing. So by the time you've worked out the team after 3 ODIs, then you know where the guys are going.
So guys, just please note that we're shooting this before the World Cup final, the morning of the World Cup final. We will do a follow-up video sometime this week where we talk about the World Cup final and maybe go through, maybe look at our succession plan again. We put a video up last week about the succession plan and where Vision 2023 and maybe the new coaches that could possibly take over from Otis Gibson. But there was something that derailed the Proteas after about game 3 that we need to talk about. Basically, it's the major elephant in every single room, and you don't even have to say in a room. Anywhere you walk, there's an elephant following you.
And it's been lingering for quite a while.
So AB de Villiers, CSA, you know that Cricket South Africa spoke about AB de Villiers and they came out and they released something. Well, we assume that they released it to ESPN Cricket Info, and ESPN Cricket Info actually broke a story that AB asked to play in the World Cup. He asked to be part of the squad the morning of the squad announcement. AB has since came out and said that those rumors are false. He did speak to Faf, and he told Faf that if there is need for it and if they need him to play, he will be available to play. But he didn't put any pressure on the selectors to pick him. He said that if they need him in the team, they need to do so. Virat Kohli has supported him. Yuvraj Singh has supported AB. I mean, it's been quite a massive story that has been following us throughout the whole World Cup series. My personal opinion, and don't slate me for this, I hope I don't get into trouble for saying this, but I feel like that if CSA did leak it was kind of almost to take away the distraction or take away the attention from how poorly we were performing in the first 3 games. I mean, I don't think AB himself would have leaked this to the press. I don't see any strategy for that. So maybe that's what happened. But I'm not 100% sure. We have to go check our facts and actually follow up on the story to actually see. So don't take my word for it. It was just a theory and an opinion. But Al, what do you think about the whole AB situation? Is it time to just move on from AB now?
It's definitely time to move on, but what was very telling was Yuvraj Singh's one comment saying that South Africa really didn't have any chance to win the World Cup
Yeah.
without him in the team. That hit hard for me. If it had been India, they would have let AB in the team.
Yeah.
The you see the. Look, it's a hard one because playing for your country is an honor, and it shouldn't be something that should be, you know, disregarded as just something happening. But he basically has earned the right to say, I'm available for selection. He didn't need to play, in my personal opinion, he didn't need to play Sri Lanka or Pakistan. What he's done for the Proteas and South African, fans and just the way he's played, he deserved that right to say, I'm available for selection. You look at Franz Steyn, hasn't played for the Springboks for a number of years, plays for a French club, and he's in the Springbok squad. He didn't need to earn the right to go play for the Sharks, and then you end up for the Springbok teams. And AB is an amazing player. Last year, the first game in the Mzansi Super League, the fans came to Newlands not to just support the Cape Town Blitz. They came to watch AB de Villiers bat. Okay, the amount of fanfare that is there, that's enough for me to select him for an international team. South Africa is obviously with history of interference and all of that. I don't want to really speak too much about that, but we always make it so hard for ourselves, and we don't need to. And a guy like AB should have been allowed in that team. They find a place for the guy. He is a superstar, and he brings the fans. I mean, there would have been fans in England going to these games just to watch AB play for South Africa, just to watch him. So at the end of the day, he should have played, and it's the worst thing that happened. And it's just horrible that after the third game, we got dragged into this whole mudslinger.
Yeah, it's amazing the power of the media, because someone that is such a legend for South Africa and has done so much for the Proteas and for the world cricket is turned into a villain like that. And some people have actually turned their back on him as a player. I was one of those people when he retired. I didn't like the way he retired, and I almost felt like he owed us as fans a little bit more. But maybe that's a bit arrogant for me to think that. And with this whole debacle, it just made me think about that. It's maybe a bit unfair the way we've treated AB, or the fans I'm talking about now have treated AB, and I think we should have respected his decision. If he decided to retire, we should have respected the decision and leave it there and not bring it up again down the line. That was a bit unfair.
We need to learn as South Africans from the past to not negatively have this horrible attitude towards someone. Look what happened to Hansi Cronje. Okay, yes, he match fixed, yes. But the way he was slated and everyone turned their back on him, and the poor oak, the last few years or months of his life must have been absolute hell, because he went from one stage to everyone loving him to I don't even know you. And don't do that to AB. He's done so much for the Proteas.
And for South Africa.
Exactly.
As a country.
And for little kids, they love the game because of AB.
Yeah.
So don't. Just because he said, I want to play. Of course he wants to play. He wants to play in a World Cup. Let him. It's a joke.
Yeah. So guys, that's the end of our video. I would like you guys to comment, share, and anything that you want to talk to us about. Even drop an email if you want. If you have any opinions, you can send us fan letters. We will try to give you as much exposure as possible. This is a platform for you to be able to express yourself. So put your comments in the comment section, smash that like button, and give us a share. Thanks, guys.
One time.